is Laura, and welcome to my channel, Boundless Books. So it's already May, and per usual, I'm very remiss in getting to my monthly wrap-up. So today, I'm finally going to go through all the books that I read during the month of April, and then also all the books that are on my to-be-read list for the month of May. So let's just dive on in, shall we? The first book that I read during the month of April was Mirror King by Jodi Meadows, and this is the sequel to Orphan Queen. Orphan Queen ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, and Mirror King just starts off right where that left off and throws you back into the action without any of that repetitive preamble, which is so common in second books in a series. The first book in the series follows Princess Wilhelmina, who is living in the land of her captors, attempting to reclaim her throne. The second book in the series continues to develop Wilhelmina's story, in addition to Prince Tobias' story. Our protagonists go through a lot in this story, especially poor Tobias, but the author manages to stay true to what made both Wilhelmina and Tobias so enjoyable in the first book in this series. We also find out a little bit more about the nature of the wraith that is invading the kingdom. The plot thickens, as it would, because you don't get it, it's missed. Sorry. So overall, I would definitely give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely think it lived up to the expectations set by the first book in the series. The only thing that I will say I was slightly disappointed about is I, for some reason, had it in my head that this was going to be a duology and that this would be the final book in the series and that everything would conclude at the end of this. But sadly, that was not the case, and there's definitely going to be a third book in the series. But I guess it's something to look forward to, and I can continue on Wilhelmina and Tobias' story a little bit more. The next book that I read this month is A Bed of Blades by Kate Avery Ellison, and this one is also a sequel. I guess this was my month of sequels, but this book is the sequel to A Gift of Poison. A Bed of Blades continues on Brienne's story, and in the first book, she's living in her uncle's castle, unloved, unwanted, and pretty much always getting into trouble. She eventually discovers that she has the rare ability to control dragons and joins up with a group of monarchists who are out to advance what they believe is the true king's cause. A Bed of Blades continues to develop that storyline and also a little bit of the relationship between Brienne and Chaol, which is kind of budding in the first book, but the author definitely advances things in this novel, which I was very eager to read about. Overall, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Really, the only reason why I didn't give it a 5 out of 5 stars is that I thought some aspects of the plot started to mirror a little bit what happened in the first book, and it became slightly formulaic. That being said, I enjoyed the characters so much that I was able to look past that and still really enjoy this book, and definitely recommend picking it up, especially if you enjoyed the first novel. The next book that I read this month is Into the Dim by Janet B. Taylor. Everywhere I look, I see this book. People on YouTube are talking about it. It keeps on getting recommended to me on Goodreads. It's on Amazon. So I eventually caved and decided to pick this up. And I was particularly intrigued when it was described as like the YA Outlander. And I love Outlander. Those books are just really fun. Unfortunately, this book just didn't do it for me. And I'm going to say right off the bat that I didn't finish it. So overall, my rating right now is like a 1 out of 5 stars. I just didn't like it at all. But that being said, I think that I might not quite be the right audience for this novel. At the beginning of this novel, the protagonist Hope Walton is devastated by the loss of her mother, who she believes has just died. However, she, on a trip to Scotland while visiting her relatives, discovers that her mother has in fact traveled back in time and is stuck in the 12th century. The premise of this book definitely intrigued me, but I just found the character of Hope to be a little bit on the juvenile side. I read a lot of YA books and the protagonists are younger, but I generally tend to go for the books where the protagonists act a little bit old for their age, and the book was pretty slow to get started and for the whole time travel aspect of things to start, and when they did, I felt that the author kind of glazed over the cool timey-wimey bits that I'm very interested in and focused a little bit too much on Hope's sort of emotional turmoil, which I was far less intrigued by. So I didn't finish this book, and overall I really don't have any plans to. I have too many books on my TBR list, and I think this book was sadly just not meant to be for me. The next book that I read this month, or actually listened to on audiobook, was Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld. For those of you who watched my previous videos, you know my love for all things Jane Austen, be it the books themselves or the movie adaptations. So it should not surprise you in the least that I ran out to buy this book the second it came out. And that is because Eligible is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, which is my all-time favorite Jane Austen story. In this version of Pride and Prejudice, the Bennets live in Ohio. Jane is a yoga instructor, Lizzie is a writer, Kitty and Lydia are just frivolous CrossFit junkies, and Mary is a strange academic who is perpetually taking an online class. The Bennett sisters' lives are thrown into upheaval when Mr. Bingley comes to town, and he is fresh off of his time on the reality show Eligible, which is basically like The Bachelor. And with him, he brings his neurosurgeon friend, Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy. I really enjoyed this book. It was fun and frivolous and perfect to listen to on audiobook, and overall I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I didn't give it a 4 out of 5 stars because obviously it's not the most original thing I've ever read, but it's really fun, especially if you're a huge fan of Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice like I am. It's kind of a no-brainer book to pick up. And finally, the last book that I read during the month of April was Flamecaster by Cinda Williams Chima. I actually mentioned Flamecaster in my previous video where I talk about my favorite YA fantasy novels, and that's because Flamecaster is the continuation of the Seven Realms series, which I absolutely adore. It's a wonderful series. This one is set one generation later and follows the son of two of the protagonists from the Seven Realms series. I'm not going to say who though because I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who has not read that series. The main characters of Flamecaster are Adrian Sewell Hahn, or Ash as he's referred to through most of the novel, and Janna Bandelow. Ash is a healer, and at the beginning of the novel, after a traumatic experience, he goes off to Spiritas, the magical school, to continue on in his study of healing without his mother's knowledge. Jenna, who is an orphan living in a down-and-out mining town, is also living a covert existence. She is secretly helping the resistance in its attempts to overthrow the King of Arden. Overall, I really enjoyed this novel. Similar to the other books in the Seven Realms series, while there are two main protagonists that it focuses on, the perspective jumps around between 4 or 5 different characters. My only complaint with this book, which is why I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars rather than a 4, is that I think that some of the plot moved a little too quickly and that some of the characters' backstories were just not developed enough for my taste. Given that the perspective jumps between a number of characters, I really wanted to know more about them before they were just sort of thrown into the mix of the story. That all being said, I'm still extremely eager to read the next book in this series. I'm sure there's going to be more because the plot was not resolved after this one. Overall, I really like the world that this author has created. I like the characters. I really want to know more about what happens to them and if we're going to end up going back and seeing what's going on in the Grey Wolf Throne more. So I'll definitely pick up the next one, but I was just the smallest bit disappointed by this book. Okay, now on to my TBR, or my to be read list for the month of May. This might be a slightly ambitious list given that I'm moving at the end of the month and I'm not sure how much time I'm actually gonna have to read, but I like a challenge, so let's go. The first book that I'd like to read during the month of May is one that I've actually already started because I'm extremely impatient, and that is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. And this is actually the second book in the series. The first book was A Court of Throne and Roses. A Court of Throne and Roses is Sarah J. Maas's take on the Beauty and the Beast story. The first book follows a young woman named Feyre who is living in the mortal realm, very close to the wall of the Fey realm, and becomes entangled with the Spring Court, where everyone is under some kind of mysterious curse. And in Court of Mist and Fury, Sarah J. Maas is back at it again with the bait and switch love stories. Oh my god. Now I have to say that I was way more prepared for that to happen in this book after having read the Throne of Glass series and been wildly disappointed by the romantic relationships in that story. And while I am only 18% of the way into A Court of Mist and Fury, I can tell the bait and switch has already begun. I kind of saw it coming at the end of the first book in the series, so I'm gonna keep reading. I'm prepared. And the next book on my list is Eragon by Christopher Paolini, and I'm showing you the spine of the book because I don't have a dust jacket. But my coworker was kind enough to lend me this book to read. It is one of his favorite YA fantasy series, and sadly, I have never read this. I think I was a little old when it came out, and I just never ended up picking it up. But in my quest to read all of the amazing YA fantasy books that are out there, I decided that I needed to add this to my list, and I needed to make reading this happen this month. Continuing on in my quest to read all of the YA fantasy books that I missed when I was younger, I'm going to be reading Artemis Fowl by Eoin Colfer. I'm probably definitely saying that name wrong, so I apologize for butchering it. There are just a whole mess of books in this series, but it follows a young man who in this first book is 12, and he is a millionaire genius who becomes entangled with fairies. I'm not entirely sure how that plot is going to work out, but I'm really excited to get started on this series. I remember seeing this book in pretty much every bookstore when I was younger, but for some reason I just never picked it up. So now I'm going to amend that mistake and start reading this series. Next up on my TBR list for the month of May is Sleeping Tom by the wonderful Evie Fairfall of a booktube couple. Evie was kind enough to send me this novel to read, and I'm really excited to dive into it because first of all, the cover art is really beautiful, and I believe the sequel to this will be coming out soon, so now's the time to definitely start reading this. This book follows a young woman named Caden who, in a desperate last resort, takes a ride from a young man named Gabriel. With nowhere to go, Caden convinces Gabriel to put her up for the night. However, at night, Caden discovers that Gabriel becomes somebody else, somebody named Tom. So if you couldn't tell from that little teaser description there, this book involves a character with a split personality, and it has awesome reviews on Amazon, so I'm really excited to get started on this. And last but certainly not least, I wanted to continue on my quest to read a book inspired by Jane Austen every month, so the final book on my TBR list is Love, Lies, and Spies by Cindy Anstey. This book is described as an homage to Jane Austen on Amazon, and the cover art for it is beautiful, so I was basically powerless not to get this. This book follows a young woman named Juliana who is spunky and in true Jane Austen fashion, disinterested in all of the frivolous things that attract most of the young ladies her age. During the course of the novel, Juliana becomes entangled with a young gentleman who turns out to be a spy for the War Office. I am really intrigued by the description of this book, and the reviews on Amazon so far are pretty good. I think the primary complaint that people seem to be having with it is that it's a tad formulaic, but I'm okay with that because I just love stories like this. So I'm excited to pick this up. It'll be a nice kind of easy, fun read. So there you have it. Those are all the books that I read during April and all the books that I hope to read during May. Fingers crossed that moving apartments doesn't throw me off too much because I have an ambitious list of books to get through. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and definitely let me know in the comment section down below what books you are looking forward to because I might just check those out and review them as well. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel so you can stay up to date with all of my latest content. And until next time, my name is Laura, and thank you guys so much for watching. Bye! Today, I'm going to go through all the books that I read in April and then also let you guys know what books I'm reading in May. This is a terrible opener. I need to do this again. Okay.